our faith community, there's an overall call to healing and repentance, forgiveness, a peace between brothers and sisters, excluding no one. Every sinner has a past, but every saint has a future. We have two very special guests here this morning, and so I would just invite Father Andre Poilievre to kind of give us a context, and we welcome them into our faith family.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Father Andre.
How are you? Okay. I used to come here about 25, 30 years ago when Brad was the pastor, and those were good moments of my life. Since then, I've moved a little bit around, worked with First Nations people across Canada, really. 5 years in the Arctic doing economic development with the Dene and the Inuit. 10 years I was Kayak High School, and here in town, and 7 years in jail as a chaplain, not an inmate, in case. And this morning we have some tobacco to offer to two young people who are going to tell their stories, and we offer tobacco as a sign of relationship. There are 4 sacred herbs in Canada. There's cedar in the west, in the Rockies. There's tobacco in the east, and in the prairies we have sage and sweetgrass. But the common procedure is to offer tobacco to someone when you ask them for a favor, or you want to honor them, or you want to celebrate an event, a ceremony. So St. Philip's is honoring that custom by offering to Chantel and Owen tobacco, and so I'd ask them to come forward to receive their tobacco.
All right.
We'll give it
Dr. Chantel, thank you. Welcome. You want to just have a chair?
Chantel.
Chantel, good.
The other thing I wanted to say, I wanted to thank you people for inviting us, as the pastors, and yourselves. I also wanted to acknowledge the Knights of Columbus. Knights of Columbus, every year for the last 2 years, have shared with us a gift, a little check, greatly appreciated. Not always very little, it's a good check. So I want to acknowledge that. The second thing I really want to do very quickly is to sort of set the stage of who we are. We're an organization called Straight Up. Straight Up happened 25 years or 19 years ago when a man that I had met at the school and another man I had met at the jail came up to me and said, Andre, we're in a gang, and the gangs had come into Saskatoon about in the mid-90s. And they said, we want to get out of the gangs, but we don't know what to do and how to do it. One had his partner stabbed and killed, and now he said, I'm the father of my daughter, and I have to raise her, and I can't be in a gang and do that at the same time. And the other one had 2 brothers that were following him in his steps, and so they said, we need help. And I said, I have no idea what to do. But we started, 2 became 4, 4 became 8, no time it was 15, and 19 years later it's over hundreds of young men and women have come up to us in order to get some assistance and support to get out of the gangs, deal with their addictions. Why they became gang members and addicts goes back 200-300 years. It's called colonization. We're all part of that. We are all receptions of the gifts of the past, but also of the crimes that were committed in the past towards Native people. And the crimes are finally surfacing today. But my 2 friends here have lived the consequences of colonization. We need to now proceed in decolonization, and this is one way of doing it.
Should I use both?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? First, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 6 territory, the home of the Métis, the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, and the Blackfoot. I was here last night, and I guess some people couldn't hear me, so they gave me this microphone before I came into the congregation this morning. I said to Father Andre, I'm going to turn it on when he's talking. I'm going to say, hello, God, can you hear me? But I chose not to. My name is Chantel. I'm 44 years old. I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a partner. I'm a drug addict. I'm an ex-gang member. I'm a criminal, provincial inmate, federal inmate, and I'm a child of God. Ow. I always wonder where I start with my story, and I'm going to start from the beginning. My father was 38 years old. My mother was 14. She was at a family member's babysitting. He was drunk. He broke into the house. He brutally beat her. He raped her, and that's how I came to be. I was adopted into a white middle-class family, and I always felt like I never belonged. By the age of 12, I figured out I'm a product of rape. I felt dirty. I felt ashamed. I felt gross. I couldn't handle it. I was out of control child. I destroyed everything. I was angry, screaming, raging. I was the kid in the mall having the temper tantrums, freaking out when I didn't get what I wanted. So white middle-class family. I learned how to manipulate at a young age. I was given anything and everything I ever wanted, except for one thing, and that was love. So I began to manipulate. At the age of 12, I left home. I became that's where my life on the streets began. 12 years old, found the man of my dreams, so I thought, and I replaced that void that I had in myself with toxic relationships, abusive relationships. So by the time I was 15, I was pregnant, and I had my first daughter, Chelsea. I have 3 children. Chelsea's 28, Kian's 25, and Cole's 21. And I continued this pattern, but there was one thing that I always held on to, and that was my education, because it was a place that I felt safe, and I felt like I belonged, and it was something I was really good at, because I was always getting in trouble at home for acting out and being a bad child, but really I was just unhealthy and hurting. Toxic relationships, one after the other. I got my education. I graduated high school, grade 12, with an 18-month-old and a 4-day-old baby on my hip. I continued right away and went back to school. I got my office education. I got my child and youth care worker diploma, and I got my educational assistant in behavioral and developmental. And I started to work in the community of Regina. I worked for social services. I worked for the Regina Public School Board. I worked for Salvation Army. I worked for policing and corrections, and I was trying to save everybody, and I was trying to fix everybody because I didn't know how to focus on the pain and the hurt, and I didn't want to talk about myself. So it was easier to fix everybody else. I was working in an off-site campus called Fresh Start in Regina. I was an educational assistant, and the people that I worked with were open custody young offenders, gang members, teen prostitutes, and addicts. Wow, my students became my associates. Associates became gang members together, and I started selling drugs to these kids I was working with. I was the staff in the staff room at break time, getting high. At lunchtime, leaving to get more dope. Coming back after lunch, high. And it escalated to me selling drugs out of the back door while I was at work. Obviously, I went to jail. I've spent the past 15 years of my life in and out of jails and prisons. I like to say I was doing life on the installment plan. I came to Saskatoon 8 years ago. For the first time, I was serving my second Fed sentence out on parole. I knew how to manipulate the systems, tell them what they wanted to hear, when they wanted to hear it, to get what I wanted. I came. Somebody I lived a lifestyle with in Regina was out here, and she said, I have 2 men I want you to meet. I said, absolutely not. I want no part of it. and that was Father Andre and Stan. And it was soon after that. I was sitting in the Tim Hortons coffee shop on 8th and Clarence, I think it was, with Father Andre and Stan talking about Straight Up. And Straight Up's become my family since then, 8 years ago. I didn't stick around, though. I was really accustomed to federally funded vacations, so I would have one foot in this life and one foot in that life and completely lie about it and say that I was living life in a good way. I wasn't, and I came to realize that that doesn't work out when you're 1 foot honest, 1 foot dishonest, right? So I went back to the gang life, my addiction spiraled out of control, and I went back to jail. Every single one of my charges, I have 107 criminal code convictions for drug trafficking and 22 charges for guns, weapons, and trafficking of those. I went back to jail. Third time, parole officer looks at me, she goes, "Aren't you mad that you're here?" I said, "No, I'm not, I'm alive." I said, "You have no idea what I went through this time before I came back. I was kidnapped, I was put in a trunk, I was given a choice to live or die. I chose to live. I had to commit a horrendous crime on somebody else, and I was beaten unrecognizable for 6 hours, held hostage." And I said that to her. I said, "So I'm happy to be here." And she's like, "Wow, you need help. You need trauma therapy. You need help for your mental health." And it was the first time ever in all of my life, and that was at the age of 41, 3 years ago, that somebody said, "You need help," because everybody always told me, "There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you." So I believed them, right? So, court transfer, still facing charges in Saskatchewan from Alberta, transfer me to Pine Grove, White Birch, 7 times. I spent half of this federal sentence in provincial courts facing provincial charges. And I was over in Saskatchewan from Edmonton, November 19th. I remember the day, it's my daughter's birthday. And I was trying to phone her and wish her happy birthday, and I couldn't find her anywhere. Couldn't find her, I phoned everybody. Don't know, we haven't talked to her. I was like, all right. Went to sleep that night, woke up the next morning, looked over. Oh, I found my daughter. She's my cellmate. I said, "What are you doing here?" She goes, "I got picked up for attempted murder, Mom." And it was at that point I was like, when does this stop? When do I make changes in my life to role model a different way to my children? And I left back to Edmonton, still not finished court. And that was the first light bulb moment that I needed to make changes in my life. Second light bulb moment. Federal institution, you never get phone calls in any jail, obviously. The phone rang and they called me down to the desk, and it was my mom. My mom phoned to say goodbye to me. She was dying and she knew she'd never see me again. And I had an idea in my mind that when I was living this life, time stood still and everything would be the same when I decided to go back to life on my own terms, and that's not the way it works. It's not self-driven, it's not about me. My mom's dying. My mom was my best friend. My mom was my role model. My mom taught me everything I know. Okay, I'm going back to Saskatchewan for court. There's gotta be a way. There has to be a way that I can see my mom before she dies. And my parole officer made it happen. I was a federal inmate in a provincial correctional center, and they took me on an escort to the hospital to see my mom. She was unrecognizable. I hadn't seen her for 5 years. I walked in. I said, "Mom?" Big smile on her face. She couldn't talk. She said my name, and I held her hand for 3 hours, and I disclosed my whole life to her. I grew up in a home where you don't talk. If you don't talk, then they don't have to hear about it. It didn't happen. You don't feel, because then they don't know about it. And you don't trust. I told her everything. And I said, "Don't worry, Mom. I graduated from high school. I graduated post-secondary. I'm a convict of provincial and federal. And I got a degree in pharmacology, pharmaceuticals, whatever it is." And she laughed. And she looked at me and she said, "Make me a promise." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "You'll change your life for the better." I said, "Deal." And I walked out, shackled from my wrists to my waist to my ankles, and an officer on each side of me. And I met the chaplain, and I wanted nothing to do with her that night in the correctional center. But I knew if I met with her, I was going to get candy, right? So I'm going to go, because I'm going to get 5 candies. And it was Chaplain Barb Laura from Gateway Ministries in Regina. She sat down with me. And I'm going to write you a prescription for the Bible. And I told her what to do with her prescription. I told her where to take it, where to shove it, and I didn't want it. But I took it anyway, because I'm relentlessly stubborn, and that's one of my strong points. And I didn't grab one Bible. I went back to my cell with 5 Bibles, all different versions, because I really wanted to understand it. And it was that night I got on my knees in cell 5, White Birch Remand Unit, and I started to pray for the first time. And since that day, everything started to fall into place for me. So I got back to the federal institution, April 8th, 2020. I was released again on parole. This time I went into my hearing with 14 supports. And the joke was, in Edmonton, we heard they shut down every church for your parole hearing. I was like, probably. Because I had somebody from every church, and our common denominator in my parole hearing, that everybody that was there to support me was God, and it was powerful. Chantel, you're a high risk to reoffend. We don't want to release you, but these people here with you prove that you've put in the work. You're going home. I came back to Saskatoon. Mirwasanota Halfway House, 6-hour drive with 2 pastors, Pastor Oliver Johnson and Snowy Noble, and it was probably the most godly 6 hours of my life. Amazing drive. Came back here, got my own place. Stan told me to work at Lululemon, that I shouldn't be in the field of helping people, and I said, So I applied for a job at Straight Up a year ago. Myself and Owen got hired at Straight Up. We're lived experience mentors. I give freely to other people what was given freely to me. I got a house yesterday. God blessed me. A lot of people judged me for my past and wouldn't rent to me. And yesterday I had the option of choosing from 2 houses. So I bought my own car. I've reconnected with my family. I've reconnected with my children. And life is good. And for me, I owe it all to the work that God does through me. So thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Owen Pelletier, and I'm from Cowes First Nation. Very grateful and blessed to be here today to share some of my sacred story with you on behalf of Straight Up. I'm a first-generation fallout of the residential schools on my mother's side of the family. My mother, all her family went to residential schools. I'm also a victim of family fracturing from the 60 scoop on my father's side of the family. Him and all his siblings were taken from each other and split up all over Canada when they were children. My father's side of the family, I still don't know them. It's all fractured. I don't know who they are. I haven't connected with them throughout all these years. As a child, I was apprehended from my family numerous times before the age of 5 due to abandonment, neglect, abuse, not being properly cared for. At the age of 5, I became a permanent ward of the government, and I was placed in foster care for 7 years. As a child, it wasn't explained to me why I was there, how long I had to be there, what I did, but I was blaming myself, not understanding what was going on. I was placed into a foster home with a non-indigenous family, taken from my culture, my family, my environment. It had long-lasting negative repercussions on my life. I didn't know who I was or where I belonged. As a child, I was hurting inside. I would go to school, and there was no indigenous kids at the school, and I was picked on, I was bullied, I was called names because of my race, my ethnicity. I was being called racist names before I understood what these names meant. So I was accumulating a lot of hurt inside. By the time I went back to my auntie when I was 12 years old, I had a lot of pain and suffering going on in here, but I was unaware of it. So as a young teen, I was running away from home. I wasn't listening to my auntie, and I was clashing heads all the time. I wanted to go hang out with my friends. Started smoking, started drinking, started doing drugs. These are how we numb our pains, and this is what I chose. These things are not free. They cost money. How do we get money? We start stealing. You start stealing, police get involved. At age 13, I found myself with handcuffs being taken to jail. First time. I was really scared. I was intimidated. but soon found out that a lot of the people in jail were just like me, suffering from the same things, the same intergenerational traumas that I was afflicted from, they were suffering from. So it was easy for me to join up with these guys. I didn't have positive role models in my life at that time saying, come here, young man, come this way. It was the gangsters and the homies and the bros saying, come this way, little homie, we got you. Give you some money, here's some clothes, you know, we got some love for you. So I wanted that belonging, as we all do, that connection, and that's the path that I chose. In my 20s, I joined a gang, and I was involved with the major gang in Regina for over 12 years because I was hurting inside and I was unaware of it. I was hurting others, and I was hurting myself, my family members, selling drugs, stealing, fighting. In 2013, we were selling drugs out of a house, and these guys tried to come and rob us. A fight broke out, knives came out, and after everything settled down, a man was collapsed in the alley and he lost his life that day. I was there when it happened, but I didn't do it, but I didn't phone the police and say this is what happened. And so after their investigation was concluded, they found out I was there, and so they picked me up and they charged me with murder. This was in 2013. I was sitting in the Regina Correctional, charged with murder, thinking my life was done. I thought I was going to the pen for the rest of my life. It took about just almost a year for the trial, for the investigation in the court to realize, okay, you know, I wasn't the one who did it. It was someone else. So he ended up taking a deal, and they dropped the charge on me. I was clear of that, but I wasn't healed inside from my traumas and my pain. And therefore, I was still using drugs and alcohol to numb my pains. At some point, I became sick and tired. In about 2016, 17, I picked up the phone and I asked for help, something that I was never taught to do. One of the hardest things I ever had to do was ask for help. And I was begging in this phone to this drug counselor and saying, I need treatment, please send me to treatment. See, I've struggled with drugs and alcohol for most of my life, over 20 years. And she said, go to meetings. And I thought, okay, and I was discouraged by that. And so I went back to the drugs and alcohol. 2 weeks later, I phoned her back, crying, begging, I need treatment, please send me to treatment. She said, okay. She sent me to Takakoop First Nations, Cree Nation Treatment Haven it's called, and that's where I met another straight up member. See, I was from Regina, he was from Saskatoon. We met at the treatment center, he told me about straight up. And I thought, wow, that sounds amazing. Ex-gay members helping each other to heal and helping the community, that sounds really cool. They didn't have that in Regina at that time. I got out of treatment, I went and told the gang, I said, hey guys, I don't want to be part of this anymore, I want to pursue a different life. I want to be a speaker, I want to share my story and be able to guide all the young lost lives out there away from that and guide them into the righteous life. I think that would give my life meaning and purpose and mean that I didn't waste all my years out there. It wasn't a waste, I was accumulating knowledge and education that I can utilize in a good way. So I ended up not utilizing my resources when I got out of treatment, and I was back in the drugs and alcohol, but I wasn't in the gang anymore. But just because you leave the gang doesn't mean you deal with your drugs and alcohol issues. So I had to learn that the hard way. I made my way to Moose Jaw, that's where my mom is from, and that's when I was out of the gang, I was alone, I felt hopeless, I wasn't sure what I was gonna do, and I found my way to the church. And as I found my way to the church, I started finding that light, and I was being guided, and I followed it. I was baptized in 2018 in the summer, and then I made my way to Saskatoon in 2019, like the end of 2018, Christmas time. I went to Calder Treatment Center again I went to detox, then treatment. It's designed that way for a reason. So I went there, and that's when I met Father Andre. He came there with Straight Up. They did a presentation, and I said, hey, I want to join you guys. I want to be a part of this. This is totally where I'm meant to be. So he showed me the conditions of how we joined Straight Up. I wrote my autobiography. 2 weeks later, I was at Kilburn Hall sharing my story with the young youth there, and I could see myself sitting in every one of them because I was there. I was them. I went through that already. The difference was I didn't have a mentor or a guide like Like, when I was their age, I didn't have that, but they have that opportunity, and I shared that with them. I said, you guys don't have to go that way. I went that way. It's hard, it hurts, it's struggling, it's painful. You guys have an option to go this way, and I'll walk with you, and I'll show you guys how. And after that, it was really an enlightening, extraordinary experience. I felt moved from within. I felt, this gives my life meaning and purpose. This is what I'm meant to do. And I felt it inside. So I moved to Saskatoon. I went to live at McLeod House, which is a men's recovery home in Saskatoon here, and I stayed there for 18 months. During my time there, I stayed really close to Straight Up. I was with them weekly all the time. I was doing presentations, sharing my story. And every time I get to share my story, I get to heal, I get to educate, I get to inspire and grow. One day with Andre 2 years ago, he said, we're having lunch, and he said, what are you going to do with your life? What do you want to do? I said, I want to be a motivational speaker. And he said, well, that's nice, but it's not really reliable. You should go back to school. And I had an open mind, and I caught that. And I said, okay, that sounds good. A month later, a couple weeks later, I went in and enrolled at the First Nations University of Canada. And since then, I've been getting high marks and passing my grades. I'm halfway through a degree in indigenous social work. And so I'm really blessed with my work that I do with Straight Up. It gives my life a lot of meaning and purpose. I'm also a father of 3. I have a 19-year-old daughter, a 16-year-old son, and an 8-year-old son. And my daughter gave birth in March, so that makes me a mushum. And so I'm able to take all these blessings that God has granted me with this new life, and I'm able, as Chantel said, to give back freely what was given to us in a good way, in a healthy way. Sharing my story helps me to heal and grow, and I'm very grateful to be a part of Straight Up today. Thank you.
We are blessed this morning to have shared in what Owen has described as a sacred journey. A sacred journey. God's action in their lives through the gift of those who reached out to them, supported them, etc. We hear in the Word of God today this whole question: does God only speak through authorized channels? And the first reading tells us, Moses says, I wish everyone was a prophet. I wish everyone had the Spirit of God in their life to share and to bring that gift of life to others. We know that very often within the church we become so dependent upon authorized channels of the Word of God that we minimize the importance or the gift that God gives to laity. He gives to everyone the gift to share life and to bring hope into the lives of people. Jesus, someone outside our little circle is using your name to cast out demons. Stop him immediately. But Jesus says, don't even try to stop him. Whoever's not against us is for us. We are invited to open our life. Would that all the people of the Lord were prophets. It doesn't take theology, degree, or a doctorate in philosophy to share faith. And we see that today, the gift that has been given to us through Chantel and Owen today, just of sharing the sacred journey of how God works, how the Creator is working in our lives. And so each of us have that invitation to try to share our faith with one another, with our children, with young people, with our friends, to share how God's hand is in our life, how God is writing our own personal salvation history. This is what it's about, to be able to speak and to see how God is active in our lives. The Canadian government has designated September the 30th as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And today we prepare for the Orange Shirt Day, And we've welcomed these two indigenous persons today to speak with us from STR8 UP. And we thank Father Andre for organizing and enabling this to take place for us today. So the work of the church is to overcome evil and to build up the reign of God, to cooperate with the plan of Christ for a world of justice and healing. And anyone who is trying to accomplish this goal of community, of family, and the dignity of the individual, respect of the earth, is worthy of our support. We tend to live in closed circles of people because of being comfortable, like-mindedness, sharing values and belief. But Jesus challenges us to recognize God's presence in a broader circle, a broader circle. We're blessed today to have shared in this time as we move into this week of respect for Indigenous persons and wanting to be a part of the process of reconciliation.